I could get used to this. I may not even bother to boot camp my computer. This is so much easier. Well, I don't know. I do like the interface in Windows better, but it is nice to have things that just work. No muss, no fuss, no drama. Okay, we're back to information cascades, so let's do that. Slideshow, play from current slide. There it is. An information cascade is what they call it when people in a social network start deprecating their own thoughts in favor of the popular consensus. So it's similar to groupthink, but without the group. At heart, it's a bandwagon appeal that feeds itself like a vicious cycle. So, for instance, you go to a restaurant for dinner. It's one you've gone to before, and they have great food, but when you get there, the parking lot is empty. But there's a huge crowd at the restaurant next door. You decide the people next door must know something you don't and change your plans and join the big crowd next door. As you enter the building, you see another party walk up to the empty restaurant, glance at the crowd next door, and do exactly as you did. You are now part of the crowd of people at the popular restaurant that by its existence and its bigness is changing minds about where people plan to eat. But, of course, you and probably most of the people whose response you're basing your decision on know nothing at all about the restaurant. Maybe all of them came over for the same reason you did, thinking with so many people there it must be good. Maybe the restaurant started the cascade itself by hiring a troupe of stooges to pretend to be eating there. That is an information cascade. It's a pattern made by successive people making heuristic decisions based on other people's heuristic decisions, so like a trust market Ponzi scheme. Except that most of the time the results are relatively good. Even if a bunch of the people eating at that restaurant are only eating at that restaurant because other people are eating at that restaurant, that cascade got started somehow. Most likely the signal you're getting is largely accurate and the food is good. The trouble comes with its spinability. With the example that I gave, where the owner of the restaurant hires a bunch of ringers to come pretend to be eating there. Information cascades can be induced. So, how do you use this system for personal gain? Well, consider this. Let's say you've gone into business as a house painter. You don't have a track record, you just have a truck, some paint, and a brush, but you want to jumpstart the business. What do? Well, you might create a Yelp page for yourself and invite all your friends over for a Review My Business party. Over beer and pizza, 10 of your acquaintances would take turns logging in and waxing rhapsodic about your awesome. This is just a screenshot from several years ago when I was looking for heating and air conditioning contractors. And one of them had a bunch of reviews and nobody else did. That's social proof or social evidence. But it's also part of an information cascade. You don't really know whether those signals are good or not. They just are there. So that's the idea. I think I was talking during the wrong slide. This is the slide I'm talking about. And it is possible that Extraordinaire, the one that's got 6 Google. These are Google Plus reviews, so this is old. Maybe they did exactly what I just said. It was just kind of a striking pattern when I was looking at the stuff. So yeah, the availability cascade is a special kind of information cascade. What makes it different from the others is it's very spinnable because it draws its power from something spinners have control over, how readily an example comes to your mind. That is controlled by media. The media exposure. So an availability cascade is a self-sustaining chain of events which may start from media reports of a relatively minor event and lead up to public panic and large-scale government action. How does this work? Oh, and by the way, all heuristics are equal, but the availability cascade is more equal than the others, according to Timur Kuran and Cass Sunstein, who are the noticeably libertarian-leaning social scientists who did this study and coined the term availability cascade. You'll notice there's a certain valence of, oh my gosh, the stupid media is manipulating us, that kind of suffuses this. Sometimes with an academic study, you can kind of read some stuff about its authorship kind of through between the lines, and that's always really good to do, because that will give you some kind of idea which direction the information is kind of leaning. I'm not going to say spun because that implies intentionality, but we all see things through a valence of our own particular personal viewpoints, and it's good to know that personal viewpoints are the people whose information you're taking in. Well, how does the availability cascade work? At a certain point, the attention that a story is getting from the public becomes a news story in itself, and coverage of the coverage adds fuel to the story. More people talk about the story among themselves. The availability heuristic then makes them start thinking of it as a bigger and bigger threat. Remember, the availability heuristic is the one that made all those people think that they were a lot more likely to die of an accident than diabetes when it was the other way around, because so much press about accidents and so little about diabetes. So the whole thing rips along. It gets more and more like a vicious cycle. Sometimes it's helped along by availability entrepreneurs. Now, this actually is a major red flag on this study. Availability entrepreneurs implies that these people are bad actors, that they're working in bad faith, that they're trying to boost the availability cascade for nefarious purposes, and not that they're like legitimately riding the tiger because they think there's a real thing. Availability entrepreneurs, as Sunstein and Curran envision them, are basically spin doctors and Edward Bernays types who work to make sure that the media doesn't forget about the story and cash the checks that result from having done so. Newspaper and TV stations then start competing for attention-grabbing stories and angles and headlines, which the availability entrepreneurs are eager to feed them, and anyone who tries to cool the chain reaction down is open to charges of being in on a conspiracy to cover it up. Politicians, of course, respond to the fervor of public sentiment and direct public resources to the issue, and that can be a problem if those resources are needed for something less bullshitty. That's an availability cascade. Is it, again, this accounting of it is spun in a sort of a libertarian, anti-interventionist kind of way. You can see that kind of reading between the lines, and what you're going to want to account for that when you decide how much how much you want to take availability cascade theory into effect when you're evaluating, for instance, coverage of the 2020 elections, in which, if 2016 is any kind of an indication, both sides will try mightily to induce availability cascades to the disadvantage of the other. Availability cascades were first posited as a theory by Sunstein and Timur Curran, and they illustrated them with two examples, which, again, they reveal something about their sort of libertarian approach to this issue. Love Canal is one of them. Buried toxic waste was exposed in 1979 in drums that leaked and stank and contaminated well water. Residents of the community naturally got upset. One resident in particular became something of an evangelist for the cause, and at its peak, the story was in the headlines almost every day. Scientists and officials who tried to claim the dangers were overstated were ignored or verbally attacked. ABC did a docudrama called The Killing Ground. Activists paraded baby coffins before the legislature, empty ones, obviously. They didn't bring dead babies to the legislature, but Sunstein and Curran present this whole thing as a pseudo-event, like something Edward Bernays might cook up, and obviously they're auditioning the resident who became an evangelist for the cause as the availability entrepreneur, which implies, of course, that he or she, I'm not sure, I can't remember whether it was a man or a woman, is just in it for the money and the fame or something like that, which is accurate. I mean, here's the thing. It's really easy to say barrels of toxic waste leaking out in somebody else's backyard where their children are playing is a pseudo-event and that it's no big deal and that nothing actually needs to be done. That's just super easy when it's not your backyard. But leaving that aside for the moment, it's a good demonstration of the dynamic, and it resulted in the legislation that brought us Superfund cleanups. I guess what I'm saying about the availability cascades is that it appears to be a real effect. It's just that the original study of it is remarkably spun and biased, and that kind of taints it a little bit. But keep in mind, every pony comes with some horse shit. There's just maybe a little bit more or maybe a little bit less. I would argue that there's more horse shit here than on the average pony. But that doesn't change the fact that this is a perfectly good pony. and it's important to understand this dynamic. Notice, by the way, that they're almost accusing the anti-love canal activists of groupthink. Availability cascades are kind of like groupthink, so the same caveats apply when you see someone pointing to a situation and trying to claim it's bullshit because it's an availability cascade. Sometimes they happen because the heuristic they're based on is accurate. Not always, but sometimes. So you have to be ready to step back and analyze. The Alar Apple scare is the other example of the availability cascade that Sunstein and Curran cite. It happened in 1989, and Alar was a chemical that was sprayed on apple trees to regulate the growth and make the apples look good. Well, a story hit the press that showed that Alar caused cancer in laboratory rats when they were given very large doses. That didn't mean the tiny doses in the apples did anything, but it didn't mean it didn't either. In any case, a few fetching headlines later, the fear of getting cancer from apples was a bigger story than the story about cancer from apples. The availability cascade took off, and there was no mistaking it. That was what was happening. With the story of Alar-tainted apples immediately in everybody's mind, worries about it metastasized. It actually appears to have heavily damaged, if not, well, it didn't destroy it, but a lot of red delicious apple orchards were plowed up in the slump in the apple market that followed this in Washington state. Meryl Streep testified before Congress, which is, of course, an irrelevant testimonial, but it got a lot of attention. Sunstein and Curran claimed that people called poison control and asked if it was safe to pour apple juice down the drain, or if it needed to be taken to a special toxic waste disposal facility. This was the red flag that first caught my attention and caused me to question the bullshit content of their study. Because honestly, seriously, this is a subhuminator. That's the flag that got thrown on this. What kind of idiot asks a question like that? Is it safe to pour this apple juice down the drain, or will it give the sewer worms cancer? Anyway, in the end, the apple industry lost a ton of money, and Alar got banned by the FDA. Alar might have been banned because it was unsafe. It's hard to tell without reading all the reports, but even if it had been hunky-dory, there still would have been tremendous pressure to ban it because of the availability cascade. Sunstein and Curran say that the whole thing was a huge overreaction to the problem, pushed along by the availability cascade effect. They're probably right, although they're trying a little too hard to sell the point. They're probably right about it in any case. Okay, folks, that is it. That's the end of our slideshow. So I hope you have an awesome weekend. We'll be getting back together on Monday of Thanksgiving week, and we're going to be doing a midterm, and that's it. It's a midterm very similar to the last one. There's going to be more extra credit on it because I want people to be, if you bombed the first midterm, most of you didn't. Most of you did really well on the first midterm. A couple of you bombed it, and if you did, I want you to be able to bring your A game to this one and claw your way back. So that's in the plan. It's going to be just like the first one. Again, you want a cheat sheet. You're going to bring a cheat sheet, which will be worth up to 5 points. And I posted some info about it on Canvas, along with some tips for how to arrange how to think about approaching your cheat sheet. What else was I going to say? Oh, yes, the study guides are up and available. If you can't find the study guides, text me. I'm going to be out for the weekend. I probably won't remember to check my email. Text me, 541-357-2222. Study guides aren't showing up. I'm nervous about Canvas. It's hung me out before. And what else was I going to say? There was something else. Well, if I think about it, I'll set up an announcement on Canvas. Anyway, you guys are going to be great. Thank you for listening all the way to the end, and have a great weekend. See you soon. Got that one, and down here we got this one, and stop. Bye.